Welcome everyone, Rachel here from Beads by Verchiel, bringing you a tutorial on bead embroidery. So we're making a bead embroidered flower. It's a nice little project, whether or not you've done bead embroidery before, and you don't have to be a big sewing fanatic to be able to do this. So this could obviously be a necklace, you could have it as a brooch, you could have it as a hairpiece, or if you like the bolder rings, you could even go for a bold ring. So don't forget, as always, please give me a thumbs up and do pop me a note in the comments so I know you were present with me. So just to talk you through the materials, we're going to be working on a bead embroidery foundation. Very much like a stiff interfacing for working with sewing. I've sewn onto the back of that, and for the petals I'm using size 6 seed beads, although you can go for an alternative in 3mm check beads, I should be saying. In between the petals are size 8s, then I've got 10s, 15s. So for those of you that aren't familiar with things when I'm saying size 10, size 15, it's the size of the seed beads, and the higher the number, the smaller the seed bead. It's a 6mm bead in the centre. As before, what I'm going to do is zoom in. I've got some pre-made pieces because you're not going to want to see me do the same process over and over again. So I'm just going to come up from the base. And first of all, I should say, I've cut 1 metre length of beading thread. I'm using KO, and you can use any beading thread. I've done a triple knot on the back, and now I'm going to thread on a 6mm bead. That's for the centre of our flower. So I'm going to lay that over there, and I'm going to take a nosedive down to the other side to anchor this, and I'm going to reinforce it by going back through the holes I've just made. So if I turn it over, I'm going to go back through the first one and through the bead and back down there again. And the reason why I'm going back through is just to give it a really good anchor point, make it nice and tight. Now obviously you can change the bead combinations, but what I've done on this on the previous one, you can barely see it, but inside there, size 15 seed beads row. So that's what we're going to start with. So I'm going to come up through my foundation, cover the contours of this. It's about 1 millimetre from the side of the bead, and I'm going to pick up 3 size 15 seeds. I'm going to lay that round and follow the contours of that bead. I'm going to make sure they're all snug, and then take a nosedive down after the 3rd bead. Pull it through the back of your foundation. Now turn it over. It's a bit difficult to see where the first hole was, but I'm pretty sure that was it there. And then we're going to push through the 3 beads we've just added. This is where I find my hands get in the way. I'm going to pick up another 3 seed beads. I'm using a size 10 beading needle. You can use a size 10, 11 or 12. The higher the needle size, the finer they are, a bit like the beads. Hug that up. Take a nosedive down the end. And go through the back. As before, so it's like a back stitch, so you're going to go back through the 3 beads you've just added. So I'm going to continue that. Right, so we're coming toward the end of that row. So it's very much trying to get the beads to fit. You don't want to overfill it either. So I'm going to stop at that and take a nosedive down. And when you've done that, do your usual back stitch. And this is where we reinforce. And with reinforcing, what it helps to do is to make it sit better. So we're going to actually push our needle through all of these beads. And reinforcing is also a technique that you use in bead weaving. Right, so that's basically your centre bead added and the middle or the first row. Now I'm going to take a nosedive down and I'm going to bring my needle back out about 1 millimetre anywhere by the side of the seed bead row you've just added. I'm now going to switch to size 10 seed beads. So I'm going to use the same technique and I'm going to lay them round the size 15s in exactly the same way. So pop those on there. Take your time in making sure they sit nice before you take the next steps. Take a nosedive down, turn it back, back stitch to the previous hole you've just made, and then go through the 3 beads you've just added. Now I think you're kind of getting the gist of it. So I'm going to switch over to one that I've done earlier. So you would go all the way round as before and you'd reinforce and push your needle all the way through again. Now this at least gives you an example of different colours. So we're going to shimmy on and we're going to presume that we have done another row. So in here you have your 15s around your 6mm bead. You've got 2 rows of your size 10s. Now I'm just going to thread my needle and I'm going to start by showing you how we make and form the petals. Let's just pull over the other piece. Okay, so what we're doing is these petals here. So we are going to position them, but they're going to be free floating, and then in the next row we'll anchor them down. So I've brought my needle out about 1 millimetre above the last row. 5 size 6, which have large seed beads, like so. Now this is where it takes a little bit of time to figure out how it sits. So you have to bear with me because it's quite difficult to show you on camera as well as to do it. So the petal will come round like that and you need to position it so that you have room for your seed bead to sit. So I've kind of figured that that is about the right spot. I'm just going to take it down a wee bit more. Now when I pull that, you can see how that sits. So we've got a process to do where we're going to go all the way round, position my needle in such a way that you've got space for your next bead to sit. Now what I would suggest is that you're going to have to use the beads in the base as a guide. For example, on this one, these are 2 seed beads apart from where my thread is. So you're going to have to try and eyeball it. So I'm coming out of this one here. We go along 2. There we go. The other thing just to be mindful of is with check seed beads, they aren't always perfectly formed. So you might have to be selective in your bead selection. So I am just going to use every 2 seed beads in this row as a guide. So there's my thread. I'm going to count 2 seed beads away, and that hopefully should use as a relatively good guide. Now the difficult part is getting it to fit at the end. There we go. So you see how that is forming. I suppose you could really experiment with different size beads. I have tried it with smaller ones and it doesn't look quite as nice and effective. And get that to fit. Taking a nosedive down. In the next round I'll be showing you how you anchor these down, and also how you pop a little decorative bead in the middle, which also gives it a little bit of extra stability with the petals as well. So the last one, I'll pop that up there. Aren't these beautiful beads though? I love the cobalt blue. Obviously if you're doing the 3 mils, the 3 mil checks, it's exactly the same technique, but it does take a little bit more precision work with it. There we go. So we've got all of our petals in place. So on the next one, what I'm going to show you is how we actually anchor those down and add a seed bead in between as well. So we've now got to add these silver beads. So just talking you through what we did. Now, technically, I should have added a 6mm bead. And I discovered the error of my ways last week because I could not understand why I ended up with 9 petals when I should have had 7. Well, my commentator's eye was not working because the middle bead on that is a 6mm size. The middle bead on this one is an 8mm, which is why we ended up with more petals. But a happy accident, because we now know if you use an 8mm bead, you end up with more petals. Now I've threaded on another bit of thread. What we're going to do is to make this bit, I'm going to show you where you position your needle. So I'm going to start by bringing my needle. Let's get myself on camera so that you can actually see. I don't know if you can see where my needle is there, but it's coming out basically in between one of the petals, right smack bang in the middle. Hopefully you'll be able to see a bit better when I put the bead on. So I'm going to add a size 8 bead, which is the next size down. I'm going to lay it across the top of the petal. First, I am actually going to make a nosedive down to the right. Okay, and keeping that on the top, then, excuse the different coloured threads on here, I'm going to go back where your needle came out of before, go back up through the bead I've just added, and this time I'm going to anchor it to the other side. In my case it's the left. It probably looks as though it's on the right for you. Okay, so let's just turn that round. So what I've done is I've come up in the centre, I've added a bead, I've anchored it one side, started back here, gone through and anchored it the other side. So I'm going to move on to my next one and come out in between the next petal, add another seed bead, lay it across, and first of all we're going to go to the right side of the petal. I wouldn't suggest, I'm going to turn that over, go through the same hole, pulling it too tight, because if you pull it too tight you're going to create a different look where your bead actually sits inside the petal, but we actually want it sat on the top. It kind of, I mean, you could go for that look, but it kind of gets a little bit distorted. We will presume, okay, that we finished that. So here's my finished piece, and I've just done one in a slightly different colour, a 6mm this time. I actually remembered there's a, if you can see, there's a small row of size 15s in the inside. So I've anchored all of these down, and here's my stitching. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but you know, nobody's going to see that. So with this one, you've got to be slightly more careful. But the most important thing is not cutting into those stitches. So what I'd recommend you do is, first of all, just trim off some of the excess. I suggest cutting from the back, but having a quick look at the front so you don't catch any of the beads. Now I wouldn't stick it on like that because obviously you can see a lot of the foundation. So I would spend a good bit of time trimming It's not going to look absolutely pristine, but there's some little top tips I can give you. Now, if you're going to be doing this a lot, I would recommend that you invest in a pack of Sharpie pens. Now, the Sharpie pens are wonderful for colouring in the white bits that are really, really bright. So, for example, if you can see a lot of the white at the front, is you can choose a Sharpie pen that's of a similar colour. You can even get metallics in it now, which is very clever. Let's just turn that over. So can you see how you're gradually doing that? So I would just keep switching between the front and the back and cutting into that. but just make sure that you don't actually cut into those stitches. Now you're going to have to, when you glue on your foundation backing, equally you're going to have to take time to actually draw around the bits that you want trimming. You could either use it as a template first of all, and I'll do a little bit more, nearly there, but I want to, all I'd say is you spent all this time doing your piece, is it's really not worth rushing. I wouldn't recommend, don't use big scissors like this, use little ones. You know, you can get some really reasonably priced ones, but you can get a lot more precision with them. Let's just work that way round. So can you see that you can barely see that? There's a little bit here, so I would take my time with that. When you've done that, I would suggest one of two things. Now I use something called ultra suede, and you could either glue that on there. Where's my E6000? So I'd use E6000 glue. Gosh, that's well used. You could either use a pen and actually trace the contours around this and trim it, or you could actually apply your E6000 and trim it afterwards. So I'd cover your E6000 all in these areas and pop that on there. It doesn't take long to set. It is, I'd leave it for 24 hours. Got a nice little thread hanging there. Leave it for 24 hours to basically completely set. But it is quite quick. You know, it's sealed within probably 10 minutes. And then what I do after that is I would pop a jump ring through one of the beads, and then I pop a chain through that afterwards. I've put a split ring on there as well, just for an extra bit of security, and then I pop that through there. Lovely to see you all, and I'll catch up with you soon. Bye.